On this week's Whether or Not, we've got nature and the news stories about orange snow in Europe, as well as an arrest warrant out for Punxsutawney Phil. Plus, in this week's feature, we've got one of Penn State's biggest experts on severe weather talking about tornadoes across the United States. That and your weekend weather all coming up straight ahead. Whether or Not starts right now. And welcome to this week's edition of Whether or Not. I'm your host for this week, Jake Langedyk.
And I'm your forecaster, Brandon Sawyer.
So, Brandon, there's a saying in March that goes, the month comes in like a lion, but out like a lamb. Is that saying going to hold true for the last weekend of the month?
Well, yes, it looks like it just might. We were looking at some average temperatures this weekend with a little bit colder on Sunday.
But it should stay nice and dry for the kids to have their Easter egg hunts on Sunday, I hope.
Yes, that's right. And then next week we'll lead into a gloomier week with that rain.
We'll see what kind of surprises Brandon has in store for this weekend's forecast. But first things first, here is a look at nature in the news. Punxsutawney Phil is a wanted man, or should I say, groundhog. The Monroe County Sheriff's Department has issued an arrest warrant for the world's most famous groundhog. Phil did predict 6 more weeks of winter back in February, but the Monroe County Sheriff's Office has waited long enough for spring to arrive. And, well, who could blame them? Much of northeastern Pennsylvania has seen more than its fair share of snow and cold this winter, and for Monroe County, they've been hit especially hard. But Phil's handlers are keeping a very close eye on their favorite rodent, and the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, where Punxsutawney is located, is also on the watch, making sure Monroe County authorities don't try to haul him in. A.J. DeRoom, one of Phil's handlers, says that Phil is simply the messenger and doesn't actually create the weather. Let's just hope the Monroe County authorities don't go hog wild and hold themselves up trying to catch a beloved icon.
Well, if you ever wanted to try skiing on a Martian ski slope or witness a toasted marshmallow-like sky, then you should have packed your bags and taken a trip to Europe last week, as parts of the continent saw orange snow. The orange-brown filter applied briefly to that part of the world was caused by dense Saharan dust kicked into the air and swept north. The process began when a polar jet stream made its way farther south than usual last week, bringing the strong winds and thunderstorms needed to whip up the dust. A trail of storms have been going through Italy, the Balkans, Ukraine, and into western Russia. And finally, this last storm that moved through, an area of lower pressure closer to the northern coast of Libya, helped pull the dust up. More Saharan dust is expected to enter the atmosphere over the coming week. However, changing conditions over the Mediterranean make it unlikely that the dust will make its way north this time around.
According to NASA, there are over 3,700 confirmed exoplanets as of 2018, with many, many more still yet to be discovered. Exoplanets are planets outside of our own solar system that orbit a star. Now, some scientists believe these planets could actually sustain life, and the European Space Agency recently announced that a new telescope will be built and launched by 2030, dedicated to studying the atmospheres of these exoplanets in the hope that a suitable environment for new life can be found. The Atmospheric Remote Sensing Infrared Exoplanet Large Survey, or ARIEL for short, will use spectral imaging to determine the chemical composition of certain exoplanets. When a planet passes across the face of its star, ARIEL will use light that filters through the planet's atmosphere to determine variables like temperature, gas composition, and radiation. ARIEL will eventually join NASA's Transiting Exoplanet Survey space satellite, as well as the James Webb Observatory set to launch next year, and another European exoplanet observer, Plato, in 2024. While the project is slated to have a price tag of over $550 million, to European and American astronomers, it's a small price to pay for the chance to find life beyond our own backyard.
Last year, during an especially severe summer storm, torrential rains moved through Philadelphia, flooding streets and clogging stormwater drains. With nowhere to go, the dirty water rushed into surrounding rivers and ultimately the Delaware Bay. Stormwater runoff is one of the nation's leading causes of water pollution, and the state of Pennsylvania has tasked hundreds of cities to reduce stormwater pollution. In fact, Philadelphia is legally obligated under the Clean Water Act to mitigate stormwater pollution by 85% over the next 2 decades. The daunting and disruptive task of overhauling Philadelphia's current stormwater management system comes with a $10 billion price tag that would take many decades to repay. To counteract this cost, the Philadelphia Water Department, or PWD, launched a program titled Green City Clean Waters, aimed at putting soil, grasses, plants, and trees to work naturally to absorb stormwater. PWD's goal is to transform 10,000 acres into living landscapes, rain gardens, permeable pavements, green roofs, pocket parks, planters, and other projects capable of storing and filtering water that would otherwise cause harmful, costly, and disruptive flooding and pollution around the city. Hello everyone, I'm here with your weekend forecast, which is shaping up to be quite the average weekend here in State College with the exception of some rain late Saturday night. First on Friday, we do see this low pressure system already move through, but bringing with it just behind it some precipitation early Friday morning. On Saturday, we'll be under high pressure conditions with a new system approaching from the northwest, bringing with it late Saturday night some rain, making for cooler conditions on Sunday, but again, that precipitation has already moved through, allowing for some mostly sunny conditions on your Easter Sunday. Back to Friday, we will have a high of 51 degrees, right around average, again with that morning shower, and partly cloudy skies will make way to a clear and colder night on Friday night. Heading into Saturday, we're going to have just above average temperatures on Saturday. It'll be the warmest day of your weekend, again without those rain showers late Saturday night, making for a cooler Easter Sunday on Sunday. Next, I'll hand it off to Addis with a feature on severe weather.
While it might not look like it, it's the start of severe weather season, and last week's severe weather outbreak in the southeast reminded us of just that, with a preliminary 28 tornadoes reported on March 19th and March 20th. This is the beginning of what is usually the most active time of year for severe weather across the central and southeastern United States. I got to talk to an expert right here at Penn State on what leads to the formation of severe thunderstorms and at what time of year Pennsylvania is most likely to see severe weather. Dr. Markowski is a professor of meteorology at Penn State. He specializes in severe weather research. I asked him why this time of year becomes more favorable for tornadoes, especially in the southeastern U.S.
It's basically one of the key ingredients is warm, humid conditions, so that's most likely to be found in those states during that early time of year, the late winter, early spring. Essentially what happened is we had a front moving through an air mass that was what we call unstable. What we mean by that is that it was relatively warm and humid at low levels and fairly cold aloft, and that's what initiates thunderstorms. And the environment of those storms was such that there was also a lot of wind shear. And when you have wind shear combined with thunderstorms, the storms can be severe.
So why is wind shear, or the changing of wind with height, important for thunderstorms?
Most succinctly, you could say that as wind shear increases, the storms become more organized. It allows updrafts to be interfered with less by the cold air that is produced in the storm. You get cold air in a storm where the rain in the storm evaporates, and there's always some competition between the cool air due to evaporation and the updraft, which is feeding off of warm and humid air. And if those two interact in negative ways, then the storm isn't as severe.
Last week's outbreak featured a bit of luck. Tornadoes are most deadly when they strike after dark and in areas with a high population of mobile homes.
Those are two things that really can be very dangerous from a casualty perspective. We didn't have those the other day, which was a good thing. Hopefully that luck continues through the rest of the spring months.
While rare, severe weather can happen in Pennsylvania during the months of March and April, normally during unusual warm spells. On March 23, 2011, on a day where temperatures soared into the 70s, an EF2 tornado struck Hempfield, Pennsylvania, tearing the roof off of Hempfield Area Senior High School. As spring progresses and the jet stream lifts northward, so does the area most under risk for severe weather. While there is no formal peak in Pennsylvania, severe weather becomes most likely in May and June, and the low levels of the atmosphere become more moist and winds increase in the upper levels of the atmosphere. As the jet stream lifts into southern Canada, the tornado threat lessens somewhat during the summer months and is usually replaced by damaging wind.
By the time we get to July and August, when there is severe weather, it tends not to be from tornadoes. It tends to be more from damaging straight-line wind events. That's partly a consequence of the fact that it's a hot time of year, and there's a tremendous potential because of the heat. The hotter days actually have lower relative humidity in the lower atmosphere, and you can potentially evaporate a lot more of the rain that falls out of a storm. More evaporation means more cold air produced by the storm, and that the more cold air you have, this is where the damaging winds come from actually. Damaging winds occur when that cold, heavy air races out ahead of the storm and blows things down in the process.
May 31st, 1985 and May 31st, 1998 reminded us that tornadoes don't care about state lines or mountain ranges. When the conditions are right, severe weather can happen anywhere at any time. That's why it's important for you to be prepared. Always pay attention to the forecasts, heed all warnings, and have a safe place to go when dangerous weather threatens. With our recent cold spell, it's hard to even think about thunderstorms. But let last week's event remind you that our atmosphere is not far away from some major changes. For Weather or Not, I'm Addis Uclo.
Hello again, everyone. I'm back with your extended forecast, and we'll see that average weekend turn into a gloomy week next week. But to start off, we'll look back at the weekend recap here. Again, on Saturday is going to be your warmest day of the weekend, with rain showers late Saturday evening, making for a cooler day on Sunday. Looking into next week, temperatures will be below average for the entire week, with sunny conditions only on Monday, making way for some rain on Wednesday, as well as some cloudy conditions on Thursday and Friday.
Well, Brandon, there's another saying we have over in the weather department. April showers bring May flowers. Will that be the case?
Yes, that's right. Well, next week's forecast is looking a little bit gloomy with some rain on Wednesday. So it's looking like we might have some May flowers in store for us.
Yeah, well, we mentioned April and May. That actually signals the start of the severe weather season across much of the U.S. And speaking of which, early in the show, we asked you, when was the first official tornado forecast issued? Was it A, 1935, B, 1948, C, 1955, or D, 1974? If you guessed B, you are correct. On the night of March 25th, 1948, a tornado roared through Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, causing widespread damage, but thankfully only a few injuries and no fatalities. But the destruction could have been much, much worse. Just a few hours earlier, Air Force Captain Robert C. Miller and Major Ernest J. Fabush correctly predicted that atmospheric conditions were ripe for tornadoes in the vicinity of Tinker Air Force Base.
Well, and the forecast issued by Fabush and Miller on March 25th, 1948 was the first step in establishing the organized warning and watch program that blankets and protects the nation today. And thankfully, in Pennsylvania here, we're not quite in peak tornado season yet.
That's right.
So I don't think we'll be seeing any tornadoes here on Easter Sunday.
That's right. It's also amazing to see how technology has improved over the last 70 years, too.
That's right.
Really incredible. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Weather or Not. I've been your host, Jake Langedyk.
And I've been your forecaster, Brandon Sawyer.
Have a great weekend, ladies and gentlemen.